This is Urban Agriculture, episode number 22, Clare-ity of Thought.
From Microbe TV, this is Urban Agriculture, episode number 22, recorded on March 16th, 2016. Hi, everybody. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and you are listening to the talk show all about the Third Green Revolution. Joining me here in the studio is Dickson Despommier.
Hello, Vincent.
The father of the vertical farm. Was it tough delivering that vertical farm?
Well, actually, the fathers don't do that. It's the mothers that actually have the hard time.
You never told me who the mother was.
Well, you shouldn't refer to me like that then. It's true. You can't say someone's the father of something unless there's the mother of that same thing,
Okay,
right? So
okay. You're just being picky. Also joining us today in studio, we have a guest, our second in a row.
Indeed.
From Kish and Cathcart, Clare Miflin. Welcome to Urban Agriculture. And now it looks like we're starting a tradition of architects on the show.
It's a tradition.
Could be. We can make it whatever we want. Exactly. Two architects, but you're from the same firm as Gregory, who was on the last show. And Dickson assures me that you do different things, right?
Completely.
And we'll find out today.
We will.
I would not mind actually making this week in architecture. Why don't we change the show and just get a stream of architects who do different things?
Wouldn't that be interesting?
Is there an architecture podcast? Do you know?
There has to.
I'm sure there is. I don't listen to one.
I don't need to. You are an architect. Why would you?
Welcome to the Pritzker Hour. This year sponsored by...
Where are you from?
I'm from England originally.
What part?
Born in Hexham in the north, but I grew up just north of London in St Albans.
Where's Hexham? Is that Yorkshire or
Newcastle?
Newcastle.
Ah, it's where we carry the coals.
You're so corny.
There's a Newcastle disease, though.
Do you know Dickson? You know Dickson,
yes,
right? Because he comes to your firm, or you've met him at meetings, or
he's been to the firm. He did a really interesting course at our firm called Ecology for Architects, which was maybe what led me on my biomimicry route.
Perhaps. It could have.
Is that a good idea? Do architects not usually learn about ecology?
No.
Ah, interesting. You just build buildings without a regard for the environment.
Well, we learn environmental principles, but we don't learn about ecology itself.
That's interesting. I think, Dickson, you should start an architectural school with a emphasis on he's laughing at me. At ecology.
No, I'm not laughing at all. My dream was to make this a formal course, and to give it as a concentrated 3-day exposure to architecture firms. It could still happen, but
it could still happen. I think there's more and more interest from architects.
Well, I think you're right, because what you're about to tell us, I hope, through this narrative that we're going to establish today.
We'll never get to it.
Probably not. No, but there are other connections to, which we will also reveal in the near future, that it's all about structure and function. I mean, that's biological, isn't it? Architects live by those rules.
Mm-hmm. Who was the architect who said that?
Louis Sullivan.
No, not him. It was the Bauhaus guy.
That's
Mies van der Rohe.
Yeah, but there was another guy, Walter Gropius.
Walter Gropius, too. I have a quote by Gropius I give lectures on virology and on structure of viruses. Mm-hmm. So here on my desk is a virus particle. It's built with certain principles, and I talk about that in that lecture. And I have a quote from Gropius, who said, for something to be functional, it has to be beautiful and functional. I got the quote wrong, but you understand what I'm saying. Right. Hey, let me look for it. Actually, I have it right here. The beauty. No, I don't have it on this.
Louis Sullivan has a paragraph on this topic, and I quote it in the Vertical Farm book, but I can't read.
So you grew up in London, you said?
No, North of London.
North London. Not the same thing.
North of London.
Oh, it's
like 20 miles north.
many
on Hampstead Heath. No, that's not. That's in London, right?
That's in London. No, it was north of London, Harpenden, right by St Albans.
I've been to Bath. I've been to Bath. Is that north?
That's a lot west.
That's west.
Do they call this the Midlands by any chance?
No, that's further north.
Further north. Okay.
This is home counties. Hertfordshire, home counties.
And you, I don't know what the schooling is in England, but you went through all the schooling in this north of London. You went to college? Where'd you go to college?
I went to Edinburgh University.
Edinburgh. See, she says it right. Edinburgh.
It's a wonderful school.
It was a great city to be a student in.
I
can't think of a better one.
I've been there a couple of times for meetings. It's very nice.
Did you go to the Elephant Lounge?
On one of my
Harry Potter.
I didn't know that, actually.
University of Edinburgh, and you studied what there?
I studied architecture there, and then I took 2 years out. I was master of taking years out. I took a year out before I started to, and I went to Berlin for a year and Jamaica for a year. Wow. 2 very different experiences. Wow. And then I finished off with 2 years in London.
Okay. And you were an architect after all that, right?
Yeah. It was all architecture, right?
When did you get the calling, so to speak?
You know what? I actually applied for engineering first. I wanted to be a design engineer originally.
Okay. You still can be.
And then touring engineering schools, seeing those fluid mechanics diagrams and stuff. I was just, it'll be a long time before there's any design involved.
The architects and engineers don't often get along because whatever you say to build, they say that can't be done, and they're usually right.
I like working with engineers closely.
You do.
I think that's
why now.
I mean,
was there something in your family that predisposed you to this line?
Actually, my family are scientists. We lived where we did because my father worked for the Agricultural Research Institute, and my mother was a botanist and then a high school science teacher.
What did your dad do at the institute?
Biotechnology.
Cool.
In crops.
Crops, nice. Now, in England, when you study architecture, do you just go out and put up a shingle and work and design things, or how does it work?
Well, they do make you do that 1 year off, so you work in a design firm, so you get an idea of what the working world is like. And then when you're finished school, you spend a couple of years and then you take a professional exam. But I actually came straight here after finishing school.
You didn't work in the UK at all?
I never worked in the UK as an architect, no.
All right. And then you came right to Brooklyn,
Right to Manhattan. No, I worked for a couple of smaller architects before I found Kiss and Cathcart.
So coming out of school, did you have a specialty of any sort in architecture?
No, but I was already interested in sustainability and trying to get into that, and New York wasn't the best place to have come to for that. I would have been better off going to the Netherlands or something.
How did you find Kiss and Cathcart?
Through an engineer at Arup, who I was asking, where could I work that is sustainable? And he told me about Kiss and Cathcart and sustainable design, and that was in 2000.
Okay.
And I've been working for them since then.
So back then, were there not many firms with sustainable
No, back then there weren't many at all. Kiss and Cathcart was really at the forefront.
And now there are more?
Now there are a lot more. I still think we're at the forefront of who actually does really sustainable work, but there's a lot more, and there needs to be a lot more.
It says on your website that you have a deep understanding of environmentally sound building practices, techniques, codes, and standards that you apply to all of your projects. And it lists a few.
Written a long time ago.
Is that still
true?
I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, I really like to know the systems behind the building and how you can really integrate them in integrative design. If you work with mechanical engineers right from the beginning, you can right size everything. You can make everything make more sense. I mean, you have to think of the building as a whole. And by working closely right from the beginning, this can be some major savings.
Now, let me ask you this. One more question, and then you can... At the beginning of your history, it says LEED AP BD plus C, Certified Passive House Designer. What does all that mean? I have no idea.
LEED is a standard for green building, and it means I took the exam to be a LEED accredited professional building design and construction.
Oh, and AP. Got it. BD plus C.
Because now they have LEED then split up into different specialties, like building design and construction or commercial interiors or for neighborhoods. So I'm accredited by them. And then just 2 years ago, I did the Passive House course and got accredited as a Passive House designer. which was much harder exam than the lead exam. A lot of calculations and.
But you like that, right? You wanted. To
I do like it, but it's very dry.
I see. Well,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
As technologies change, it becomes easier to make those calculations because you can capture a lot more energy passively now than you could 10 years ago or 5 years ago. No, so you say, well, I'll just put PVCs on the roof and that'll take care of most of my energy needs, or I don't know. How does that work?
Well, the passive house, it makes you calculate really accurately how much solar radiation is coming through your window.
Okay.
On each particular facade, the volume of air you're conditioning, because it's all about having a really airtight envelope and a well-insulated envelope. So it took us back to basics to really figure out the area and the solar heat gain of every single window, taking off the frame. It's very specific, and how many air changes per hour, per occupant, and the volume of air in the rooms.
What made you do that, though?
What made me do that? I totally believe in passive houses for this climate. As
off the grid, so to speak?
No, it doesn't have to be off the grid, but before you add PVs and stuff to generate energy, if you can...
Oh, I see.
If you can use less energy, it makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
And New York City's great because we have really good solar as well. We get twice as much sun in the winter as Germany, for example, I think.
How about that?
So not only is it good in that you can use the solar that's come through your windows to keep your building warm, but the air quality is really good inside because you have energy recovery ventilators that bring in fresh air. And then in the winter, the cold fresh air comes in and it's warmed by the outgoing stale air that you're exhausting.
Got it.
So it's really good for allergy sufferers. The air quality is great.
Nice.
And they showed that even in New York City, say, it's really good for resilience because if there was a blackout in the middle of the winter, your residence doesn't get lower than 50-something degrees because there's the sun's still shining, occupants give out heat. And so...
But this is
survive.
The passive is only for commercial buildings, or it can be for residences as well?
No, it's really great for residential, but you can use it for any type of building.
So a single-family residential home that would work,
Yeah, there's a lot of them in Brooklyn, single, 2, 3-family, renovated brownstones that are passive houses. The tallest passive house in the world is actually going up in Roosevelt Island, the Cornell Dorm.
Oh, great.
Yeah, but it can be...
What's the Cornell, by the way?
Okay.
What does that mean?
Cornell University has a research campus on the Randall's Island?
Roosevelt.
Yeah, I remember they bid for that. Several universities bid for it, and they got it.
They did.
They did. So you said you can't open the windows, though?
No, I didn't say that. You can definitely open the windows. I said there's natural ventilation at all times.
Okay. I thought you said something about a sealed envelope, so I thought that...
No. Oh, it's air sealed, so you don't have air percolating through your wall, which could, in many buildings, have nasty sealants and VOCs coming in.
Yeah.
He just installed some PVCs on his roof.
PVs?
Passive.
PVs.
What's it?
PVs.
What does PV stand for?
Photovoltaic.
Photovoltaic, right.
Yeah.
Gregory taught us that.
Yeah. Did you just get some?
Well, they're working on it. They haven't started yet.
Oh.
It's a lot of negotiation to figure out how many they can put on and where.
Okay.
And we had to take down a lot of trees. And they wanted to put some on the front of the house, but we decided not to because it looks badly. And the realtors told us it would make it difficult to sell the house, which is a problem because one day I would guess
hopefully not.
In 10 years, most of the houses will have them, and then it won't be an issue. Sure. But we may want to sell it before then. So I'm looking forward to saving money, basically, and contributing to a reduced carbon footprint. But I'll let you know when they're installed.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's better if the architects can design them in the first place so they can look good too.
At the point of construction.
Yeah.
Right. So would it look so right now they're raised panels, right? They're screwed into the roof.
Yeah, they could be the roof itself.
Be the roof itself.
Yeah.
I actually saw a house where it was the roof. It was flat right on the roof. That's beautiful.
But there's a big issue with that. I heard, at least from most of the fire departments, that if there's a fire in your house,
yes,
it's very difficult to break through the roof to get to the fire.
Yeah.
So how do they... You have to design them so they just clip on and you can clip them off, or you leave a space for the hole or what?
Yeah, I didn't think it was about breaking through the roof. I thought it was more about they're worried about access on the roof. Electric shock more. I mean, if the roof is sloped, you're allowed to put them on.
Right.
And you're allowed to put them on roofs in New York City, but you have to leave certain paths for the fire department to tread on.
Indeed.
If you're under 100 feet tall.
So we're moving closer and closer to our topic.
Oh, can I ask one more question?
Sure, absolutely.
There are different levels of LEED certification for buildings, right? Can you go through those?
Oh, okay. So there's certified, there's silver, gold, and platinum.
Okay, got it. Because I've known in some research buildings I've visited, new construction, some of them are platinum, LEED's platinum. I visited colleges with my kids, and they always say, oh, this is a LEED's platinum building. We just built it. And that's the best, right? It's most efficient?
Well, it's the highest in their rating system. You can get points in different categories, so it's not necessarily the most energy efficient. Although they're giving a lot more weight to energy, so it would have to be very good energy-wise to get platinum, but it can get points in lots of other categories too.
So they have a series of standards you have to adhere to get certification at these different levels, right? They have a book and they say this is what you have to do.
Yeah, there's some things that are you have to do, and then there's extra points you can go for. So you choose which credits you're going to go for, and depending how many you get, that depends on what level you get.
Okay, so you build your building, and then do they come and inspect it and make sure you've done everything?
No, you submit and tell them what you've done, and they have various people that review it.
I see. So you could actually not do anything, and they would...
Well, I think it would be pretty tricky because you need energy models. They ask for stuff that's part of your typical design process.
So here in New York City, does new construction typically go for a LEED certification of some sort?
Not necessarily, but public buildings have to be LEED Silver minimum. There was a local law on that. And a lot of commercial buildings do go for LEED now.
Does it cost more to do that?
I wouldn't say the construction costs more, but the time spent on the LEED process adds cost. And if you weren't going to have an energy model anyway, the energy modeling adds cost.
Got it. Dickson, I think this building is LEED negative.
I know it is. That's right. It's LEED. It's lead.
This building was built in...
You want to pick a metal that typifies this building, it's lead.
This is built in the 70s.
Yeah, they had no concept of that at that point.
So inefficient. Badly made. The air is terrible.
Steel and glass
you can't
building.
Open the windows.
Can't open the windows. They can be opened. You see, there's a key, and someone has the key. Because then they come and turn them, and then they wash the outside.
The dean has the key to prevent us from jumping out of the windows.
If you want your windows washed, they will charge us for it. And in addition, they charge us for cleaning our floors in the lab. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. So the first steel and glass building, as far as I remember, this is the Schenley building on 5th Avenue and Park Avenue and 53rd or something in that area. So the building materials for making a building look like this have only been used for the last, let's say, since 1960. Mm-hmm. And so they've gotten very good at now using this material in a more efficient way, I guess. But I've attended some meetings, particularly the Design Futures Council, which was so anti-LEED, it was amazing that to hear these people badmouth LEED because they said, if it's truly sustainable, you can trace that material all the way back to the origin of where you got it. And LEED doesn't require that, as far as I can tell.
No, I mean, some people have a lot of issues with LEED, and I can see those issues. It's a checklist. It kind of encourages a checklist mentality at times.
Right.
You can get a point for, say, using a carpet that is a sustainable type of carpet, like an interface carpet. But if you didn't have a carpet in your project, you wouldn't be able to get a point at all. So you may just put a little bit of carpet to get the point, for example. It can encourage the wrong part of your brain to be working harder. Yeah. But that said, it's encouraged a huge amount of green building. And on the first LEED project I worked on, the client wanted the contractor to cost the different LEED points. So we had various alternates in. It was a supportive housing project down on Houston and Pitt Street for Common Ground. Great project. They wanted it to be LEED Silver, but they wanted the contractor to say how much each LEED point or some of them cost. So they said, okay, a green roof, this costs that much, and it goes towards these lead points, and they costed. There was another credit for the air flush out to make sure it was low VOC. And then I saw all these, and I'm like, hey, we can have a green roof if we just don't do the air quality testing, which I was fine with because we'd specified very low VOC finishes, and there went a lot of sealant.
VOC is what?
Volatile organic compound.
Okay.
So I found that it was really useful to get a better building in that case.
So in a new construction, would you always have windows that can open as opposed to ours?
Yes, I would.
And user openable, in other words, not just
I would. I believe it definitely creates a lot higher satisfaction if people can control their indoor environment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we are not satisfied, are we, Dickson?
Not even a little bit.
I mean, sometimes they used to have systems that had a red or green light and told you when the conditions are good for you to open the windows. Yeah. They don't tend to have those anymore, but they're...
Yeah, and the other thing I heard, excuse me for, of course, continuing conversations which we've had for like 3 years already, the monitoring of energy use in a building is extremely difficult to insinuate into the design. In other words, it's like putting remote sensors on all the windows that report back to a device that say whether it's actually leaking or not, or whether it's actually trapping the air and keeping it from going out, and therefore the temperature is being maintained because the seal is good. These sorts of things. Like we have these feedback mechanisms in our own biology built in. You get a fever, you've got an infection, you should probably take some aspirin.
Yeah. Feedback is fairly primitive.
It's fairly primitive. So the building industry needs to, and now we're going to get to this subject, take inspiration from nature and start building with these loops in mind that allows you to have confidence in resiliency and redundancy and livability. And again, I mean, this is a program about, urban agriculture, but it doesn't have to be necessarily about that for us, because it has to be ecologically satisfying to live in a city which espouses this attitude, because that way they will make it economically incentivized for the people who come in there and also agree with that. And you can start to rearrange a city in a way which saves on energy, saves on resources, makes your life better, uses less materials, allows a building to be completely recycled. Once you get tired of that one, you can make another one out of the same building that looks completely different. Those sorts of thinking processes are relatively new in the built environment. How's that? So, I mean, I think vertical farming falls into that category too. When you say green roof, well, why not make it an edible green roof?
Yep.
And there are some good reasons for not doing it. Winter is a very good reason for not doing that.
Or a native plant green roof. I mean, there's quite a few different
sedums and also, but they're difficult to maintain. I've seen programs on that too, and it's not just a green roof that you want. You have to be able to maintain that. So Columbia University, for instance, has 5 green roofs. As the last time I heard. We have like hundreds of green possibilities. We've only done this on 5 roofs because there's a maintenance issue, and it doesn't always succeed. And it doesn't always prevent heat from going out and keeping in the cool as you would like it to balance off. The best example I know of like that was at the City Hall in Chicago.
Yeah.
All right.
Pretty fun.
It was crazy. The building is a mirror image of itself, and half of it is controlled by the county and half is controlled by the city. The city elected to have a green roof, and the county, being opposed to the city, of course, elected not to have a green roof. So while I had the privilege of visiting with Mayor Richard Daley Jr., I asked him whether or not he knew the metrics on whether or not the city half of the building was saving money compared to the county building. And all he did was just laugh, and he threw up his hands. And his sustainability officer was in the room with us. And she says, this has always been a problem with this. We don't have a way of measuring whether we're actually saving money or not. But it should be obvious simply because one traps the heat in the winter and allows the sunlight to bounce off rather than accumulate in the summer. So you should have a lower energy bill in both directions. And that should have been reflected in a bill that they get every month for their heating or cooling devices, but apparently not. So it's maddening to hear this is a great idea, let's do it. And then, of course, why should I do it? And you have to prove to them that it's economically,
Well, there are benefits beyond insulation. You could just add insulation to your roof if that's what you wanted, but the stormwater benefits, the air cleaning benefits.
No, I know. Then you attract wildlife, which controls, like birds, for instance, that control insects.
Yeah, and they grow herbs on their roof.
And they grow herbs on the roof. They do. They grow a lot of other things, too, that they shouldn't be growing, but that's okay. So it's a tangled mire of labyrinthical thinking that got us to this point, because it's trial and error, and it's like, this doesn't work. The public's health is being threatened if you keep designing buildings this way. You've heard of sick building syndrome? Mm-hmm. That was a 50s and 60s and 70s concept. I don't hear that said anymore. Do you still use that?
You don't use it, but I went to an interesting lecture at the Center for Architecture recently that they had really tested with different levels of CO2 and cognitive abilities and VOCs, and they had measurable results that really showed people were better at making decisions with less CO2 in the air.
So growing plants inside of a building is not a bad idea.
Actually, that Passive House course I told you about, it was in this office that had no ventilation, and the mechanical engineer brought a CO2 sensor, and we got up to 900, 1,000 parts per million, and my brain, wasn't all the calculations. Yes, it was way high.
Wow.
Should we get some plants? Should we get some plants in here?
Quick.
Yeah, maybe you should.
Yeah, perhaps we should.
So that mostly it's from people exhaling, right?
Yes, yeah. And there wasn't
I'll be
good
done.
ventilation.
There's nothing there to absorb it.
So
yeah, that wasn't their fault, the course people's fault, and they've moved it since.
But here we should have something taking the air out, right?
You can hear it.
Yes.
But is it really working?
Well, in what sense? It's going to pull it out. It's got to work, right? And I assume these levels vary according to the occupancy, right? During the day when a lot of people hear it's higher.
Yeah. I mean, often your mechanical ventilation is triggered by a sensor which senses the amount of carbon dioxide.
Really?
And brings the right amount of ventilation in. So especially in things like classrooms that might be empty for a lot of the time and then have a full class of people in.
Right.
That kind of room is better if it's demand control ventilated.
Right. But a building of this age would not have those kinds of controls.
No, but your occupancy probably doesn't vary much either, so you may not need it.
Yeah, classroom is a good idea because there are periods where it's full and the kids are falling asleep.
They're putting up a new building there, Vincent. We had a chance to ask whether that's included into the design.
Who could we ask?
We could ask the engineers. They're still over there working on this building. Right. So that's a very good question. By the way. Okay, so now I want to switch to something not completely different, but highly coincidental to our current discussion. My wife and I were fishing out west last year. We tend to do this. We drove out, and Marlene was not in favor of driving out the year before that. So we flew. So flying out, where do you fly to, right? So our favorite city to fly into is Missoula, because we like Missoula. It's a wonderful little town. You've been to Missoula because you had to go to Hamilton. In order to go to Hamilton, you had to go to Missoula first, right?
That's right. I did.
So the P4 facility is. So here we are, set to go home, right? We're staying at this little motel. It's a fairly reasonable motel. In fact, it was a very reasonable motel. It wasn't a high-end place.
It was very reasonable.
It was extremely. That's another way of saying, and I won't say it. So Marlene and I come down for their complimentary continental breakfast, and who should we see standing at the checkout counter, going back to where they came from, but Claire.
6:30 in the morning.
6:30 in the morning.
No, really?
I know you. I've seen you somewhere. You're totally out of context. What the hell are you doing here? And, Marlene recognized you also. So we had a wonderful, very, very fast conversation about what you were doing in Missoula. Take it, Claire. What were you doing in Missoula?
I had just come from a 1-week biomimicry workshop in a wonderful spot. It was actually Helena, Montana. And we had been on this amazing ranch. It was a huge ranch, a week intense session by the people from Biomimicry 3.8, because I was just thinking, I've been looking at emails that had come for years thinking, this looks so fascinating to study this. And I was just thinking, I should just go ahead and do it. I'll sign up for their graduate certificate, but I wanted to see it in place. It seems to do an online course is not at all the same as going on a intense workshop. So I just spent a week in this ranch in Montana learning about biomimicry and getting the essence of what it means, how you practice it.
Was Janine Benyus part of that?
She wasn't, but it's from her organization. Yes. Her and Dana Baumeister really are the main people behind Biomimicry 3.8. And they've been running this course to be either the graduate certificate you can have to be a biomimicry specialist or a biomimicry professional. And the course is longer, and it's like 2.5 years to be the professional. And I think they're just starting, I think it's the 4th go-round of it. And the people who were teaching did it the first time round, and so they were pretty experienced. A restoration ecologist and someone who actually did an architecture degree and then a biology degree, and they were teaching it. And I met Dana there too, and it was really inspiring.
So can you explain what biomimicry
Biomimicry is really design that is inspired by nature's genius. So the most common examples you hear are early ones like Velcro. Velcro was inspired. The inventor came home, had the burrs on his wool jacket, and he's like, hey, this could be useful for something, and invented Velcro. Or self-cleaning glass that was inspired by the lotus leaf, where the water just rolls off with the dirt and doesn't leave streaks of dirt. There's a lot of examples of materials that are made because nature's materials are amazing. I mean, I remember hearing a bird flying into a spider's web. It's like a aeroplane flying into just regular rope net in terms of force and thickness. So actually, spider's webs, bird-proof glass, the Ornilux glass, was inspired by the spider's web because spider's web have special threads in them that reflect UV light that birds can see, and it stops flying into the web. And they use that same UV light on glass, and we can't see it, but birds can. And then the glass building kills a lot less birds.
That's cool. That's very cool.
So there's a lot of simple things that emulate nature's methods, but it's not just that. I mean, they have 3. Biomimicry involves emulating nature, involves an ethos component, and it involves a reconnect component. And this is what really drew me to it as well, because the idea of reconnecting to nature, knowing it a lot better, and then designing, knowing its principles, is just really inspiring.
Can you explain a little bit what you mean by that? Is like ethos?
Ethos is like the belief, the moral belief in the thinking that we should design within nature's boundaries and not destroy the rest of nature, that humans are a part of nature, and that so far we haven't been thinking like we are.
So how do they teach this? Do they give examples of bad and good ethos?
They call it well-adapted or maladapted.
I see.
So you could, for example, because what they don't want you to do is imitate nature for bad reasons, because you could imitate nature's processes for something that is not good for the future of mankind. So they don't want that to happen.
Already done all that. Why do you think they call it Biomimicry Institute 3.8? What's the 3.8 all about?
3.8 billion years of nature's genius.
That's how long it's been trying all these things.
That's how much experience are behind the idea.
So that's remarkable to realize that that's the case.
What was the other component besides ethos? There was one more.
Reconnect.
Reconnect. So what's that?
Or is in parentheses. So you may be connected to nature, or you may not be and have to reconnect to nature.
Yeah.
The assumption is we were all once connected.
Yes. Or we may have grown up connected to nature. Many of us did in our childhoods and then got away from it in our adult lives and may need to reconnect, or we may have been connected the whole way through. But their idea is that you need to have a connection to nature in order to really inspire you.
I see.
Yeah. So 200,000 years ago, we were totally connected to nature, and we evolved, or we elected consciously to move into a world which we create for ourselves, namely the built environment, which has very little to do with the natural world yet.
Yeah.
So how did we do that? Or
because
why
we're
did we
type
do
1
that?
ecosystem.
Because there's a lot of naturalistic peoples that are alive today that elected not to do that. And they do design with nature. They design with nature. Like I'm thinking now of the Maasai in East Africa that actually build their houses out of the droppings of animals. And when it rains, it washes their house away. And when it stops raining, they rebuild their house out of the animal droppings. So they're totally content with living these little harsh moments in order to maintain continuity with the environment that they live in. And they're totally aware of our world. I've met some Maasai in East Africa, and I know that they know what a watch is, and they know what a car is, and they know what Kentucky Fried Chicken is. And they say, we don't understand why you like all that stuff, because look what we've got. And then I look what they've got. They've got the African veldt that's got tons of migrating herbivores and these very dangerous carnivores.
Yeah, true.
And they live among that in peace. And that's just hard to believe. That's just a world that I would never sleep just being afraid of what would crawl into my little boma while I was trying to,
Maybe a reduvid.
But they're not afraid. They're not afraid.
Tsetse fly.
Well, that's also true. Someone made a list of the most dangerous animals in the world. I think Bill Gates Jr. had it right. He said the mosquito is the most dangerous animal on Earth because of all the diseases it transmits. But the thing is that they're very comfortable with their world, and we appear to be uncomfortable with our world. Mm-hmm. So our job is to make it more comfortable, yes?
Yeah, I think it's not a going back to where we came from.
That's right.
That's for sure.
You don't want to live in a poop
Even
hut,
if you wanted to.
I mean,
Gilligan's Island might be the only...
architecture is pretty amazing at times.
True.
There's far too many people.
Well, that's a debatable point. I would say that there are many people not living a proper life because they don't have enough. So, but if we could find a way to get them enough, then you wouldn't say that there are too many people, I think, perhaps.
Well, I meant there's far too many people to live in the kind of density that vernacular architecture was developed. I mean, it is typically. I mean, we can't all live in little pueblos and single family or single-story structures.
We all can't live in New York.
Yeah.
So is the purpose of this institute, what was the name of it again?
Biomimicry.
Biomimicry. Is it mainly for architects or?
Not at all. No,
who else
that was really interesting, actually. What a wide variety of people were there. Everything. Biomimicry for social innovation is a big side. They had their own workshop in San Francisco because looking at, they have distilled these things called life's principles and like trying to figure out the basic patterns behind how nature works. So some of them are fairly obvious to us as architects, that you would use low energy processes, you would not create waste, you recycle. But others of them are not so obvious. I mean, modular and nested components or integrating development with growth. I mean, you don't just grow. Those can be great strategies for businesses. And so the social innovation, or looking at how insects, social structures, pretty incredible. And there have been examples of biomimicry control systems that were inspired by bees and how they
ventilation systems for termites.
Yep, that's another one. But also the whole idea of the circular economy and industrial ecology. That also can come out of biomimicry.
Sure.
I mean, actually, one of my last assignments on my course at the moment is biology taught functionally. And we had to look at an industrial system and consider whether it was a type 1 ecosystem or a type 3 and how you could develop it. So a type 1 ecosystem is what comes, well, Dickson knows, but what comes when you have disturbed land, like after a fire, you'll have the species that are opportunistic. They come in. There's lots of them. They reproduce in a R way rather than a K way. Right? I'm getting this.
Yeah.
Right. So masses of seeds. So they want to reproduce as fast as they can, rather than putting a lot of energy and effort into just a few offspring like mammals do. And they have food chains rather than food webs. Their mineral cycles are open rather than closed. There's not a lot of symbiosis. And that's really a bit like us.
I was just going to pause a moment. People that are listening to this podcast are thinking, this doesn't sound like an architect. In fact, it's not. You're beyond architecture right now. You're into the next step of architecture and engineering, and the human condition, basically, is to create a more balanced built environment that reflects natural process.
Yeah, and there's so many things it then has benefits for. So I took urban agriculture as an example. Like the food systems of New York City was my example of a industrial system. And I thought, well, it's not very resilient. Like a type 3 ecosystem would be much more stable if there was a disturbance. In New York City, 60% of our food comes through Hunts Point.
Right.
A lot of it comes from very far away. There's not a lot of close loop. We're starting to collect food waste, but we don't really have a place to reuse it.
That's true.
Gets trucked back to Virginia, or they're going to use some of it in the digester eggs. But there's not really a good loop that goes where it goes back to farms to grow more food.
Yep.
So in many ways, we were kind of at the type 1 opportunistic ecosystem. But there were little things in New York City because it is pretty well developed. There's lots of specialized things within the food system that shows it going towards a type 3 ecosystem, I would say. And those things are things like Gotham Green's greenhouse on top of a supermarket. There's definitely a loop going on there.
You bet.
Or people who collect oil from fast food and tri-state biodiesel, or
that's right.
Or the community gardens in Harlem Grown that works with kids here in Harlem to grow vegetables and teach them to compost, and
the greenhouse that you guys built on the
or the
rooftop
greenhouse on PS 84 that we just
and another one too. You did 2 of them, and we understand from Greg that you've got 2 more in the pipeline.
Yep, greenhouses on public schools, amazing the way
very important.
Educate the kids. They have aquaponics in them too, and kids learn about ecosystems and healthy eating. And there are just so many myriad benefits with urban agriculture that are way beyond healthy eating. They create community, there's social benefits. That's a type 3 ecosystem to have so many mutual benefits.
I mean, this is a health science center here, right? And if you added up all of the diseases, chronic and infectious, that were caused by carelessness and pollution and the lack of knowing what to do with waste, you could fill up a hospital worth, in fact, we do, with people with asthma and lots of other chronic illnesses that relate very much to living an unhealthy lifestyle. Yeah. So the more healthy you live, the less you need medical care. Yeah. And that may be why we don't do it. No, that's not. It was just a joke. But you look at other places around the world that are trying to adopt this right now to their own built environment, and it's inspiring to see Malmo and Linköping and Curitiba and other cities throughout the world that are actually adopting this as their mantra, so to speak. Yeah.
And, New York City has great goals. You read one NYC and it's amazing, the zero waste goal. The goals are all there. They just need to work to get to them.
Mayor de Blasio working on this night and day?
I'm actually in a group that is looking at how architects can help the transition to zero waste, which has been very
that's exciting,
inspiring and exciting.
Absolutely. Without making another landfill, you mean?
Well, architects have a huge part to play in how we collect and separate our waste, and thinking of it in a system-wide way.
You do it like the Romans, just throw out the window. So, we've come a long way since then, right? Mm-hmm. Where do you think in another 20 years from now will be with regards to realizing that the better that you design something to begin with, the less you have to tinker with it later on to get it to work. In order to start with a healthy building rather than having to retrofit and put in all these, the newer technologies for older buildings. I mean, you're stuck with an old environment, right? No matter when you start.
Yes, but there's a lot you can still do. I mean, we always renovate buildings throughout their lifestyle, and there's a lot of changes you can make even to a building like this.
Can you please help this building?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Actually, my thesis...
Adopt it as your poster child.
My thesis project in architecture school was actually taking a building, because supposedly the library in Edinburgh University, if there was a power cut, you'd have to get out in half an hour or you'd suffocate. That was what students said.
Really?
But the idea was that because it was a closed building and it was relying on its ventilation.
Huh.
I'm sure that was a slight exaggeration, but sick building syndrome was talked about, and my thesis project was to have these little ventilators that you could put through the window and that were powered by PVs and would bring fresh air. I mean, it wasn't very practical, but it was. It was the idea that you can retrofit these.
You can do that. This building could use it, but they won't pay. They won't spend the money.
No, that's the other caveat in all this is it all costs money. And I was at the reveal, by the way, from Bloomberg's 2020 project, which set down all these wonderful programs, planting 1 million trees, for instance, to keep down the dust and everything. But he says we're unfortunate in that we are a 21st century society living in a 19th century infrastructure.
Yeah, the infrastructure is really tricky.
So then what do you do?
Well, then you have to, stormwater. The city CSOs and stormwater, huge problem. Every time it rains more than half an inch, sewage goes into the water. That's a big problem. But at the same point, actually, there's something in biomimicry that says nature has to work within its operating conditions, and it taps the power of limits. So you look at the limits and boundaries, and those can be thought of in a positive way.
Yeah.
So you look at the limit of our stormwater system, and that's positive if it makes you have more bioswales and green roofs. And
So what's the problem when you have a lot of rainwater in the city?
Because our stormwater and our sewage system go within the same pipes, your system is inundated, and there are these things called CSOs, which are overflows, and they overflow straight into the water, like into the Gowanus or into
untreated.
So sewage goes in the water, basically.
Yeah.
It does. But fortunately for us, we don't drink this water. That's very fortunate.
But DEP are doing a lot of things to try and help it, and they are giving grants for green infrastructure. They're trying to do bioswales on the side of sidewalks. I mean, it's a lot of money to do it all, but they're incentivizing green roofs.
So, Claire, with all your vast experience in this area now, you're given an unlimited budget. It's for 100,000 people. What would be the 5 main priorities in designing a brand new city that could accommodate 100,000 people? Where would you start?
A brand new city?
A brand new city. Cathcartopolis.
I would look at the city in terms of it's an ecological system. What would be the inputs? What would be the outputs? I mean, you can't design anything without a place. So I would start by looking at the place. What are its resources? How much rain falls on the place? How much sun falls on the place? And then you can come up with a budget. I'm sure I would be given a financial budget too. But I would have
you're being funded through the Billionaires Club. They have as much money as you want.
I probably would want a financial budget so I could tap the power of those limits too.
Right.
But I would have a solar budget. I would have a water budget. I would look at where all the waste would go. Yeah. And I would look at the materials I used. And then you have to look at all the systems. I would look at what kind of density I wanted so I could have public transport rather than having people use cars.
You mean efficient public transport?
I would start by getting a really great team together, because I think none of this stuff can happen through one mind. And I think I would need lots of the people who are going to live in the city.
Sure. So China is already doing this, by the way. They are building cities like one a month.
Really?
Yeah, they are.
They're brand new cities from scratch?
Brand new.
Where are they, in the middle of nowhere?
They're all over the place.
Why is this? They have a need for people?
They have huge urbanization right now. They don't know what to do with it, so they think building another city. But if they don't have the right ethos and a naturalistic view as to how to start with these, they're going to just redesign the old buildings again, and they'll have the same problems, only multiply it times, 10 or 20 or 100.
Yeah, and I would not want to be building my new city in the middle of at least I would want to densify a suburban area or a small town rather than start from scratch in a nice natural site.
Right. So I'm sure you learned this from your biomimicry 3.8 experience, but there isn't a single ecosystem on Earth that does not have as its beginning point the conversion of sunlight into plant material.
Yeah.
So how would your city mimic that part, do you think?
Well, I think you have to, Biomimicry 3.8 has worked to try and quantify ecosystem performance standards. Yep. So I would take some limits, which I would say within it, I'd look what was already there. If I'm taking a suburban area, I would say before this was developed, this land, how much rainfall fell on it, how much oxygen was created, how much carbon dioxide was sequestered in these boundaries. And then I would develop in such a way that we could keep the same amount. So we wouldn't be having an adverse effect. I don't know if Greg talked about the Bronx River House project last week, did he?
Yeah, I think so. Is this
you
the
mentioned a little bit about it.
Is this the one that was originally in Yonkers and was moved?
No, that's the Science Park. So there's a project for the Parks Department and for the Bronx River Alliance, right on the Bronx River, right at that point where the Bronx River's come through the Botanic Garden and the zoo, and it's beautiful, and then it gets industrial right at this point, and many people in the South Bronx never knew it existed. And so there's these community organizations that have built up under this umbrella of the Bronx River Alliance, which is connected with the Parks Department. And this is its permanent home. But we had Paul Mankiewicz, who is a biologist,
know him very well. Yep, know him very
on
well.
our team. And
he's a good man.
It was really inspiring because he was saying, why don't you try and get the same ecological productivity as if this was original temperate rainforest.
Oh, yeah.
So he calculated for us the leaf area index, which was kind of fascinating because it has a direct parallel with floor area ratio, which all architects know about.
Oh, look, see?
How much floor area can you build on?
Been designing with nature all along and didn't even know it.
But how much floor area you can put on a certain site is floor area ratio. So in the densest parts of Manhattan, it's 10 or 12 because they're always set back. But in nature, leaf area index is how many leaves are on a certain square foot of ground below. And so we were trying to have the same leaf area index as if it was a temperate forest, which it would have been originally.
Nice.
So we did that by having moss on the walls and then a screen which doubled up as a security screen with vines growing on it. And then in that way it would help clean the air, it would lower the temperature.
Sure. And give you a view of nature that you'd never had before.
And it's in a park, so it would be great.
Park. Yeah, absolutely right.
And that is in construction right now. So, but that was the first building that we had really used metrics in an ecological way.
So how does food fit into your view of all this? Since this is about urban agriculture.
Well, food is just so important within the city.
Yes. Yes, I would say.
Making the city a sustainable city. Yeah. Apparently, I can't remember the percentage, but like 40% of the trucks coming over the GWB are carrying food, a huge amount. The reason there's bad asthma in the South Bronx is because of all the trucks coming from Hunts Point.
Here.
And Hunts Point's too small. Apparently,
already, and that's brand new.
50% of it is in trucks that are idling in diesel fumes to keep it cool. So the city really needs to solve its food system And I think there's so many ways to do that. I mean, lots of people think, okay, well, you don't want to grow all the food in greenhouses. What about the Hudson Valley farms? And it's totally not an either-or thing. You want both.
That's true.
I mean, having the greenhouses, I think, probably helps farmers markets because kids see where the food comes from. They get inspired. They want to grow and eat more vegetables.
This is true.
Relate to the farmers markets.
But it's only a summertime thing. We have a farmers market out over here every Tuesday, I believe it is.
Yeah.
And they come from all the local farms and they bring all their produce. And they start off with just some fairly exported food items, by the way, because they want to get an early start. There's nothing that they've got that's harvestable, but they can get it from other places and bring it to sort of keep you interested in the concept of a local market before their own harvests come in, which is around August and September. So they've got a whole growing season to go through. But they start out over here in May. And they're offering you things like root vegetables and celery.
Yeah, I think a lot of that they've stored over the winter, actually. I think it has to be there. So they have a rule that they have to be within the so many miles from New York City.
You're not saying they're sourcing it from other places.
Well, no. I asked them sometimes, and where do you get this from? I don't know. So they actually sort of fluffed on that one. But growing it in situ, greenhouses, et cetera, allows you the luxury of thinking about sustainability at another level.
Yeah.
So that's the inspiration that comes from just looking at the way nature behaves, right?
Yeah, and having it right there having it grown on the roof and then sold below.
How much of the
amazing
trucks coming over the bridge are actually greens as opposed to meat or whatever?
I don't know the
good
number,
question.
but I should think a lot because especially all the greens coming in the clamshell packs, that's a huge volume.
It is.
So,
and you're going to see more with Bright Farms and Gotham Greens, and the possibilities are larger so that they can actually do a lot of that now.
So maybe half?
Could be.
Half the trucks coming in have greens. Yeah, because there's a lot of packaged food as well.
Yeah, that's right.
I come in myself over the GW Bridge.
You could do an informal survey.
I would like to reduce the number of trucks coming over.
Take the lower level. They're not allowed.
You know, it's amazing that the trucks can only go on the upper level.
That's right.
Yeah.
Since 9/11, and often it's backed up miles.
Oh
yeah. I mean, we should bring more food in by barge, by
miles
train.
And miles of semi tractor trailers, huge, going back. They're sitting there idling for hours. You
see, that's when you start designing things better. There are myriad benefits that can come.
So that's the big question. How do you do that? And I think you
have to look at it in a system-wide systems thinking.
Yeah.
You have to ask questions 5 things back. Why are the trucks there? Why do we need so much food to come in trucks? What else could we do?
Who has to do this? No, you're not.
We do.
You
we all do.
Meaning all of us.
Yeah, we all do. I think it's not a top-down approach. It has to be a bottom-up approach where we all think in this way and we start to change things.
Yeah, so if you made a short list of places which already do some of this so that you could take inspiration from what they're doing already and build on that, what would be your top, let's say, 10 cities in the world that you could point to and say, if we could do this, and this, we'd be light years ahead of where we are now?
Well, I haven't done enough research to really answer that as intelligently as I would like to, but I think there's a lot of things going on in many cities that are pretty inspiring. Denmark and Scandinavia. I just saw a supermarket opened in, I think it was Denmark, that has no packaging at all. It's all bulk food, and you bring your own containers.
Nice.
I mean, pretty cool. I think they allowed compostable brown bags, but just the idea that we could reduce a lot of our packaging waste. But they have an amazing amount of bike transport and walkable cities and great animate public spaces.
Just interrupt one moment. I used to be the course director here for the Environmental Health Sciences course that was given to all the students of public health. And we had an expert come in to talk about waste to energy management. Mm-hmm. And in the East, 40% of all the garbage is cardboard.
And it's going up massively.
That's incredible. 40%. So New Jersey has a facility which incinerates paper and cardboard. That's all they take. And it's one of the highest tech energy generating systems.
On the Turnpike?
Yeah, it's on the Turnpike. And it's an amazing building and they run short of input.
Really?
Yeah.
So I passed it this morning with my son.
You mean not the Coventa? They take more than...
No, that's not the one. It's I'll think of it. It keeps changing its name because it's under new management every 10 years or so. It develops another name, but they specialize in cardboard and paper because they know it's such a huge component of solid waste.
And why don't they recycle it?
Yeah, right. I was going to ask you.
They make energy out of it.
Okay.
It's a high incineration level too. I mean,
what kind of energy do they?
They burn it, but they burn it at a high temperature. They actually influx oxygen into the.
And what do they do with the heat?
They convert it to energy.
Electricity?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, they use it for a boiler. They generate steam. The steam generates turbine. Turbine makes the electricity. So they add that to the New Jersey energy grid. There probably could be 20 of these up and down the East Coast. There aren't, but there could be. This is a very clean facility to it. Very little in the way of effluent. So those are examples, right? But they're very expensive, and you need
and I would rather have the paper and cardboard be recycled into cardboard again rather than being
or just don't have it at all.
burnt. But I mean, things have gotten a lot better with packaging. Remember when you used to have that cardboard box full of styrofoam peanuts with one tiny thing inside?
Sure.
But the fact is that people are ordering so much more online.
That's a big deal. Yeah.
Actually, I came across this in my work on the AIA committee to try and reduce waste, that the building we just designed, the amount of cardboard is ridiculous how much it throws out every week, and they're bags and bags of cardboard, and that it could be lessened at least by having a baler in the building and having smaller cardboard put out. That would be fewer sanitation trucks, less bags on the sidewalk, but also I think they have to somehow work on, I mean, we should get less stuff delivered, really.
What do you think the best incentives are for doing that? Do you think cash incentives, or do you think just behavioral differences and less health risks and that sort of thing? I mean, because it's a balance. Do you reward good behavior with money, or do you reward it with attaboy and keep on going?
I think the money thing is really difficult because you can sometimes get the incentives wrong, and it can incentivize things you don't want it to incentivize. I mean, I thought for the next development building we work on, I was suggesting like these developers are always looking for great amenities to have in the building. We have a pet spa, a dog wash, a great bike room. They have a film room. I was like, we should have a goods library. You have some nice new vacuum cleaners. You have some drills and tools. You have
like a loaner, you can take them out. Use them,
you just take them out and you bring them back.
I like that. I do.
And then you
that.
could connect it with a cleaning service that uses the vacuum cleaners that come to your apartment. But all those kitchen equipment things you hardly ever use, they could be in the goods library. You just check them out and take them upstairs. A lot less. Your air bed, your spare crib for when
got bicycles you can do that with now in New York, right? And zip card and a little bit like that.
I mean, the sharing economy really helps. Yeah, car to go.
Sure.
All those things are great.
Are these things you learned at the Biomimicry Institute, or is it just common sense?
The philosophy comes out of the biomimicry, and I have read a lot more about the circular economy, but and the exercises I have to do for homework make me think of the parallels, but it's a bit of common sense too.
So you have a daughter. Does she bring a lot of this home and talk about it?
She did a great course in her last semester called Feeding the World. It was in collaboration with Stone Barns. And she's like, oh, a lot of those things you say are making sense. I mean, they've been resistant, my kids, to pushing too much environmentalism on them.
No, that's
sure. When they hear it themselves, and when she went up to Stone Barns and saw what they were doing, that really changed.
Right.
So this course you took was 1 week initially?
Oh, that was just the 1 week.
But you've since kept
immersion
up, right?
workshop. And then I signed up. They have a partnership with Arizona State University to offer either a graduate certificate online or a master's program online. So I started with the certificate. I just got into the master's, and I just got into the next 20 people cohort to do the professional certification.
Okay.
So, interestingly enough, the president of Arizona State University is Michael Crow.
He used to be here.
He did. He was at the Earth Institute. Well, not really. He was at Lamont Geological Laboratory.
Well, he was also the financial director at Morningside.
He was, but he had experience in geology before that. So now that's probably why that connection is made.
Yeah, they've got a great sustainability.
So I just got an email from some students there who want the university to build an experimental vertical farm on their campus so they can start getting involved in this movement.
Great.
Because Arizona University already has some similar program with the Controlled Environment Agriculture, which teaches people how to work in greenhouses and this sort of thing. And Gotham Greens is a direct outgrowth of that.
Oh, yes. Giacomelli, right?
That's right. Gene Giacomelli.
Yeah, the fellow we're trying to get.
Yeah, well, we'll get him yet. We're going to embarrass him into going onto this show by praising him so he can't say no. Because he's done a lot of good. He's done a lot of inspiration at the undergraduate level to get people involved in graduate studies for inventing the future, basically, in terms of where you grow your food. So a lot of his graduates, there are more jobs available now than there are graduates to fill them. This is one of the very few areas that if you're interested in getting involved in urban agriculture, now is the time, because there are lots of jobs out there.
He should come on, if anything, because his and my last names both have 2 L's.
That's the best reason I can think of, Vincent.
Maybe I could appeal to ethnicity. So I wanted to ask you more about integrating what you learned into your firm. Are you the only person who has taken this course?
Yes, this is definitely
You're the outlier, as it were.
Self-directed. How I will involve it in my firm, I think it will change my mindset and will change how projects, how I'm inspired to design the projects and how we can connect. How I want the work with the waste is connecting into city systems and really thinking of the city in an industrial, ecological type of way. I'm not sure exactly where I'll go from here with it, but I know it's just something I've looked at. What more I would want to study, how I would want to move forward. And it's just the one that resonates most with me as being so inspiring at the same time, because it says we should use nature as mentor, model, and measure. So even though lots of the initial examples of biomimicry you see or people talk about and not that deeply connected, and they're not maybe as sustainable as they could be. They've taken just a few ideas and they haven't applied it in accordance with all life's principles. There's a lot of inspiration and enthusiasm there. And I think in order to change, we have to come from a place of hope. And it really allows the hope, because there's the fascination. It allows people to really get inspired and see that nature can do it. And there's just so many amazing examples you don't know about.
This is true.
So when you bring these ideas to the table, do your colleagues know their origin, or is it just ideas that you have and they're willing to listen?
I'm pretty open in talking about the origin, and I keep coming back with, hey, do you know about hermit crabs' vacancy chains, for example?
They go, huh?
But I find a great little Richard Attenborough video and show it.
Nice.
And everybody is fascinated.
So I'm looking online, and there's a whole field of biomimetic architecture, right? And it's all started from this institute, basically.
I don't know, actually. Janine
They were there before.
wrote her book on biomimicry a long time ago.
Well, not that long ago.
It says here that the movement is a branch off of the New Science by Janine 1997 book.
Okay. If they give credit to that, then this is...
It was 97, her book. I was going to put it a little earlier. But.
Have you read the book, Dickson?
No, but I've had the privilege and pleasure of being on the same program with her at the Omega Institute. That was about 4 years ago, and we were both pleased to meet each other because we'd heard about each other. I'm surprised that she heard about me, but I certainly heard about her. And we gave the same message in a different tone, basically, at a different scale. And there's a book that I wanted to mention here because I use it as a required reading now in this course that I'm teaching now at Fordham called Ecology for Designers and Architects, but actually it's for designers, all right? Mm-hmm. These are undergraduates that are going on to careers, it seems as they will, although many of them now got inspired to do other things as well. But design was their main interest, and they're in the School of Visual Arts in Fordham. So this book is called From Bauhaus to Eco House.
Oh, I don't know this book.
And it's you don't know this book?
No.
You'll love this book. It's 130 pages long. The guy who wrote it is at NYU. Mm-hmm. He is a very insightful architect from Norway. And he wrote this book to show you how the idea of designing with nature got subverted and perverted through well-intentioned people with little or no knowledge in that area. So we come back to your hero, Walter Gropius, as the establisher of the Bauhaus back in the 30s in Germany, and Mies van der Rohe as part of that group, and some other people are mentioned too. In other words, he covers the entire gambit from how the Bauhaus functioned in Germany to why it moved to London for a while, and then moved to Chicago and Harvard for a while, and then Chicago, and how Mies van der Rohe stayed in Chicago, and then how he was inspired by Louis Sullivan, and then he and Frank Lloyd Wright broke off from Louis Sullivan. It's got all these twists and turns. He mentions Eugene Odum, which is a world-famous ecologist, and he ends up saying in this book that none of these people who claim to have been designing with nature knew anything about nature. These were not trained naturalists. These were like bona fide modernist architects. And like Le Corbusier, all these people said, I am designing with nature in mind. Well, you might have thought you were doing that, but in those days, nothing substantial was known about how nature actually functioned. The science of ecology has only been around since the turn of the century, but actually the major goals of achieving knowledge with regards to how ecosystems work didn't start until Odum took advantage
I was amazed how recent it was.
Yeah, that's right. So Odum established his school of ecology at the University of Georgia. And the reason why he did that is because the Savannah River Project was placed very close by. And what was that? It was the first nuclear reactor in the United States. Mm-hmm. It was the leakiest, awfulest thing in the world, except, of course, it was making all these elemental lookalikes. There was a strontium 90 for a calcium lookalike. There was N15, carbon 14, O18. All the isotopes of all the things that they wanted to know what happened to were being put out into the environment inadvertently by this crudely designed nuclear reactor. And so being able to take advantage of that situation, he was so insightful that all of the cycles of nature, the carbon cycle, the oxygen cycle, the phosphorus cycle, all those cycles were determined by looking at what happens to the radioactive equivalents to those elements. And that was the beginning. Of course, it spread out beyond that into the Ecosystem Studies Institute, which is now up in Millbrook. And now there's a huge collection of ecologists up there. The point is that these well-intentioned architects and designers had no scientific basis for claiming a connection between their designs and the nature that functioned that way. And the best example I can think of is the Falling Water, designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, which almost got swept away in 1967 by a huge flood. It was a trout stream that went underneath the house. Yeah. Right? It was Bear Brook. And Bear Brook is a river, for God's sakes. What in the world possessed you to design a house over a river? Now, if you don't think I know what I'm talking about, and of course I don't because I'm not an architect, and I'm a trained ecologist, by the way, but only as a parasitologist, just go to the internet today and find out what's happening to Louisiana, Texas, Arkansas, and Mississippi. Just look at the map, the weather map, and find out what's happening. Floods are imminent. This is the word flood in their history, by the way, the worst flood. In 2011, it was the worst flood in their history. This is now being called a 1,000-year flood. That's interesting because you had a 1,000-year flood in 2011 also. So you must be counting years different than I am. So this book, Bauhaus to Eco House, traces the origins of all these naturalistic desires on the part of architects and people buying into them. Oh, yeah. that building is so beautifully designed, I can almost not tell it apart from the mountain that it's built into. Not true.
Well, visually it is nice.
No, visually they're beautiful they're beautiful examples of creative modernism.
Yeah.
But
then they're not emulating the principles of nature below. Yes.
That's right. They don't emulate anything of nature except the beauty of nature.
Yeah. And the Millbrook is the Carey Institute, right?
Yes.
I am just reading a book that they were part of this Baltimore urban ecology study,
yes,
which is looking fascinating. I'm only at the beginning of it, but it's looking at communities and how Baltimore works in an ecological way, not just
that's right.
Plant life in Baltimore, but how the systems of the city work and patch dynamics and all these ecological terms.
Vincent and I have a good friend up there, although he's maybe not as good a friend as I know him, Richard Osfeld. I don't know if you're familiar with his work. He does work on the ecology of Lyme disease by studying the ticks and the deer mice, and how that interfaces to the human population. So that's another example of maintaining a savanna-like environment in Westchester because they're very wealthy people and they can afford that. It's the absolute perfect environment for the spread of Lyme disease. You couldn't have designed it better if you had to.
Yeah.
But they didn't realize that, of course. They just wanted an open view of everybody else's home, but they didn't want to spoil the woods altogether. So they left just enough trees.
And they got rid of the predators. I read
they got rid of the predator.
An amazing article connecting carbon sequestration and the absence of predators. Which was fascinating. When you get rid of the top predator, it doesn't kill so many herbivores. And so then
they eat the shrubs and the trees can't grow, and then therefore you don't get trees, and therefore the carbon doesn't get through.
There you go. So you probably knew that without reading the article. But
did you ever get to the Yellowstone Park while you were there?
No, I didn't.
Too bad.
Unfortunately,
because when they introduced wolves, the entire ecology completely reversed back to the way it was.
Yeah, that was in the article too.
Completely reversed. All the trees came back along the rivers. The elk were hightailing it into the mountains because they were being chased by wolves. The moose population was kept low. Even the buffaloes were kept low also. So without that top predator list of, then you don't have an ecosystem. That's basically
Yeah, and it's understanding the systems that.
So interestingly enough, that's the top, right? So New York City is missing the bottom. We don't have any primary productivity. So if you were to couch a built environment in terms of ecological structure, that's basically what's missing is that bottom layer of plant material that's produced, which we, of course, forage on.
Yeah.
We're grazers.
Do you think scientists could benefit by learning biomimicry?
No, of course.
I'm thinking of this Lyme story.
Of course they could.
Even people like me who study viruses.
No, Vincent, I think that's true.
Benefit by having a view of nature?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot in the life-friendly chemistry. That's fascinating. There's a lot of interest in the built environment about healthy building products. And
that's right. That's right.
Finding out even what is in the building product is the first thing. But Mark Dorfman looks at the chemistry that we use and how different it is from what life uses. That it's not shape-based, it's not specific in its reactions. So fascinating.
There was a fantastic ecologist who taught at Yale. His name was G. Evelyn Hutchinson. And he established basically the concept of the niche. All right. This was back in the 50s, I believe. And to read his little after-dinner talk, I have an idea about the niche I'd like to share with you. Imagine this is a collection of ecologists. Oh, we're going to learn about the niche. And then he started to talk about the niche. And the first page is readable because it's in English. But the second and third pages are in mathematicalese, and they are totally unintelligible, except at the very end. And the conclusion from all this math that he conjured up from a theoretical construct was that two different species cannot occupy the same niche. That was where that came from. And then when you realize that, oh my God, that's incredible. And then the School of Forestry was established at Yale.
Yeah.
So the School of Forestry teaches how a hardwood forest behaves, right? And I don't know if you got much of that when you're out there, but hardwood forests lock their root systems together.
Yeah.
And they share resources. Mm-hmm. And when it rains, everybody benefits. When there's a drought, everybody benefits because they share the water. So can you think of a human group of people that behave the same way? And you know what it is? The International Ladies Garment Workers Union. When times are tough, everybody takes a pay cut, but nobody loses their job.
Wow.
When times are good, everybody gets a raise. Now, what's so bad about that? That's not communism or socialism or anything else. That's distribution of resources, right?
Yeah.
And when you have this much, everybody gets that much. When you have this much, everybody gets more.
Yeah, but what if you can't live on this much?
Oh, but you can. That's the point.
Well,
you can because it's a shared environment.
Maybe not. Maybe not enough for them to live on it.
Well,
it's a good view, but it may not be practical.
Well, if you ask them, they'll say, well, it's not. We never got paid below the minimum standard that would allow us to still keep our jobs. Yeah. That's the point. So, but if you look at a tropical rainforest, it's exactly the opposite. It's all about competition. The root systems don't get shared. The canopy doesn't get shared. In fact, the trees don't even touch each other.
And how do we explain the difference?
Well, they have unlimited resource. That's the sun. So how do you quickly take advantage of that? And the answer is through outcompeting your neighbor to get to that canopy layer before they do. Whereas the northern forests don't have that as a concern.
Well, that's how we build skyscrapers, right?
Yeah, that's right. So if I had to, and so you've got two different kinds of chimpanzees also. You've got chimpanzees and then you've got bonobo.
Yeah, and you've got
pick the bonobo any time of the year because they settle their arguments using sex as a way of saying, oh, no, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. But the chimpanzees say, well, I'm not sorry. In fact, I'm going to kill you. So if Jane Goodall had started studying the bonobos rather than the chimpanzees, we might have a different ethos now in terms of the way we handle conflict. And so there are ways in nature where conflict is just totally diffused by an unexpected behavior.
You need to talk to ISIS, okay? Because they're strange. They have conflict, and this is a big problem. They're not sharing anything. So
they're not.
Humanity is rather disappointing in many ways.
Well, you could say that, but there are people like Clare that's going to give us hope that
there
the future
are amazing, inspiring people out there. You just have to find them.
Of course.
Well, as long as you're not killed, that's the thing.
Yeah, well,
the thing is with what Dickson is pointing out is that nature isn't perfect either.
No, it's not.
Right?
Of course not.
You have to pick. Maybe you have to pick in biomimicry what aspects of nature, and you may have said this
already. That's one of my biologist friends. That's her first thing. Well, people often think nature's perfect, and it's not.
No.
But that isn't the aim. That it's perfect. The idea is that it has a lot of experience and knows how to keep going for millions and millions of years.
So resiliency is
lots of
key.
species have
That's
died.
Are
extinct. Many of them are extinct.
That's a lot.
But the ones who are still around have had some strategies that work. And that difference between tropical and temperate ecosystems, I didn't know any of that. The idea that in the tropics, all your selection pressures are biotic. They're other living things. It's not the environment. It's not the cold winter. And I got to just tell you about this one organism.
Please.
I think it's called the bobtail squid. It has luminescent bacteria in its gut. I mean, amazing. So it can adjust how light it is. So when it's swimming, that its predators below cannot see it against the moonlight or the sunlight.
They feed at night. So they have to be invisible against the moonlight. I mean, so they glow.
So how do you know this, Vincent?
I do a podcast called This Week in Microbiology, and I had a guest who studies this. And then at night, in the daytime, they burrow into the sand, and the bacteria leave.
Yep, they spit them out.
And then, before they have to come out again, they get new bacteria, they grow in them, and then they come out with a whole new crop.
Yeah, that kind of.
And they make delight for it's just an amazing. And this is people study this in tanks because it's a whole system in itself, and they can figure out what kind of bacteria are there, what are they doing for them. It's really cool.
So from that observation, I had the privilege of listening to Bonnie Bassler, who was the chairman of microbiology at Princeton, she discovered quorum sensing as the result of working on that. No, she didn't.
Well,
she claims she did.
She's certainly pushed it very far.
You can watch her TED Talk, by the way.
Her someone she worked with actually discovered it, but then she went on.
Fair enough.
It did a lot of work in it.
And it was that squid that she was working on.
No, she worked on. Did she work on bobtails? I don't think she worked on bobtails, but other people have worked on bobtails. Let's find out with Bonnie worked. I don't think
her name is on this blackboard over here.
It is?
It is.
Why?
BASS.
Why would it be?
Well, because I think we respect her science.
She's done a TED Talk as well, just like the biomimicry people.
Mine, but no one listened to mine. They all listened to hers.
I think she used Vibrio's. Yeah, Vibrio harveyi.
That's right.
Not bobtail squid. But others have worked on the squid, for sure.
Okay.
And I know, Margaret McFall-Nye works on bobtail squid in Hawaii, and she was on my podcast for about a year.
Oh, nice.
And she told her story on our podcast. It's very cool. Yeah. It's neat stuff.
Well, that was amazing to me.
Nature's cool.
So we should still keep looking, is what you're saying. We could discover other things, do you think?
I think there's a lot of things we could discover.
Yeah, for sure. By the way, Janine Benyus was from New Jersey. She went to Rutgers.
Oh, okay.
So you can be successful out of Rutgers.
Or out of New Jersey.
Or out of Fairleigh Dickinson, right?
Well, not yesterday. They were lost in the NCAA's first round. Too bad.
Isn't that where you went to school?
It is. I did go there.
Okay.
You bet.
And look.
Proud of it.
You made it, so.
You bet.
Dixon, anything else? Are you done?
This is an open window to the future. That's the way I look at what you've just told us, because if we stop paying attention, then we are doomed.
We're doomed.
We are doomed. We have to keep looking. And so this leads us back to a larger question, which we were discussing earlier today and throughout all of our other podcasts, and that is support for science, support for gaining more knowledge with regards to how nature actually works, is fairly low-level consideration in terms of governmental funding. Mm-hmm. You look at the biggest one, of course, it's about defense.
Yeah.
And the next biggest is welfare, and the next biggest is, I forget, but science budget is way down on the bottom someplace.
And,
I mean, it's a lot of billions.
The problem is most of that is life sciences and environmental sciences, which are very important. Yeah. It doesn't get very much either.
Nope, it doesn't. Yep. So these are people who are so dedicated that they don't care how much they get paid. They just want to do the work.
Yeah.
And that's who these people turn out to be. They're very, very passionate people that have...
Well, maybe if their ideas and their research is read more and used more by everybody else.
Right. You're right. You're absolutely right.
I mean, that's been great, having the access to all the primary literature through my ASU account.
Right. No
longer we have that $35 to read that paper.
We discussed that too.
Love all this
behind a paywall. That's right.
$30. Yeah, $35 a paper.
Crazy.
How dare they? That's not even work they did.
I don't know what to say.
I don't know. There's a lot of research in there.
You own the journal. You can do it whatever you want, I guess.
We have to take it back.
That's true. That is true.
Take it back, but it's a big problem. We talk about it all the time.
Yeah. So what journal do you read?
Well, there's a lot. I go to the Web of Science and then research different things that might come out of a variety of journals.
Right. Should there be one for the future of the built environment?
I don't know. I mean...
Wouldn't that be an interesting...
scientific papers?
Topic? Yeah, because, I mean, you can get... How do you interest the political aspect of all of this to buy into this, even though you know you're right? You need support for it, and you need to get the social aspect going as well. It's a difficult sell at some level because people don't really understand what you're trying to say until you show them examples of things.
Yeah, resilience is an interesting one because ever since Sandy, there is so much money behind resilience. And Katrina, that is a great way into designing more in tune with nature.
But Vincent, you had your house affected by that storm, and it was very long and terms of the payoff to repair the damage that was done to some people's homes and not to others. There was a misappropriation of funding in some cases, and it's not an easy deal even when you know what to do.
This is 3 years ago now?
Yeah.
So we have a house at the Jersey Shore.
Right.
We were there the other day, and there's still hundreds of houses that are gone.
Exactly.
And they're slowly being, the reconstruction is ongoing continuously.
Yeah.
There are huge lengths of beach where the houses are gone. Little by little, they're putting houses back, but man, it's taken a long time.
That's exactly right.
And the thing that's sad is that, this will happen again at some point.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's not the right approach.
Back in a different way, so that
they're all that's the other part is that they're putting them much higher because there's now a flood zone, 8 to 12 feet.
Sure.
And the new construction is fine, but they're taking a lot of these older houses and lifting them up. And now the front door is way up there.
Yeah.
No
This is crazy. Yeah, and they're all on piles driven into the sand, and then they just put kind of a wall around it that can get pushed away if the water comes
Breakaway
in.
walls.
A breakaway wall, right?
Wow.
But the steps going up are ridiculous.
Yeah.
All these tiny houses way up there. It just seems crazy. People really...
some of the ones in New Orleans, they tried to do the ones that come up.
Right. You were talking
floating
about
ones
that
like
the other day,
Holland.
right?
True.
They automatically float.
Yeah.
That's right. That's exactly.
So most
There's
of the
a
time
trend
they're
in
close to the
architecture
ground.
towards tiny houses, isn't there?
Yep. There is
So-
interest in that.
There's a whole TV show about that.
There is.
About people who want tiny houses.
That's true. And some of them are so cleverly designed. They're beautiful. Some of them are absolute gems.
I need a huge house so I don't see any.
That's the problem, Steve. The bigger, that's mine. Territorial imperative.
There's a lot of young people who are rejecting the consumerist society.
Of course they are.
And
That's why the shared...
And there's so many young farmers. That's pretty interesting.
Very.
We were just up in the Adirondacks with this young couple that
yeah.
have a creamery and...
A creamery is good. I mean, I think New England is great for dairy farming, right? And they've tried that 3 different times without success, and finally, okay, dairy farming, let's just do that. Because, that's got a long history of abuse, I guess, of trying to farm land that's unfarmable, basically. I mean, farming in the strictest sense, raising crops in soil, basically, that's what I meant. It's rocky, it's difficult to plow, there's a lot of problems with it. Potatoes do very well.
Yeah.
Of course, look where they're from.
I mean, if you want huge fields, but there are a lot of small farms that have a myriad of crops that come to the farmers' markets.
Yeah, no, I agree. We used to have a family house up in on Auger Lake, which is near Keysville, New York. Mm-hmm. And the summertime is a great time to be up there, but the winter time is really, even with global warming, it hasn't gotten too warm up there yet. Yeah, so it would be a tough sell to spend a whole year up there, I think. Yeah. So at any rate, it's a delight to hear from you and to keep in touch.
It was great to be here.
And we would love to interview everybody from Kiss You Gather.
There are more? There are more?
There are many more there.
And they're all interesting?
They are, in their own way, they are, of course. Right. What do you think? I got more out of going down there and talking to them than they got from me talking. Oh, I'm sure it's true.
We were all very inspired.
We had a good time. We had a good time with the subject and a lot of unanswered questions and a lot of different pathways that you can take to accomplish the same thing, which is, I think, another way of looking at nature, because nature doesn't solve the problem in just one way. Yeah. A lot of different approaches.
Well, this episode of Urban Agriculture, is that the name of this podcast?
I believe.
It's not architecture, you sure?
Well, there's a linkage here.
Yeah, clearly. You can find it at iTunes and at microbe.tv/urbanag, all one word. And do send us your questions and comments to urbanag@microbe.tv. We do have some questions lined up, so at some point we need to do them, Dickson.
Terrific.
All right?
I'm all for it.
Our guest today has been from Kiss and Cathcart, Clare Miflin. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming all this way. Now you have to go all the way back. We appreciate it. Thank you very much. And our listeners appreciate it as well. Dickson Despommier is at verticalfarm.com.
Indeed.
The father of vertical farming. Did I say that at the beginning?
You did, but we couldn't think of a mother, so maybe it was a parthenogenic birth.
Ronaldo's kid doesn't, right? Nobody knows who the mother is.
This is true.
Thank you, Dickson.
You're welcome.
I'm Vincent Racaniello. You can find me at virology.ws. The music you hear on Urban Agriculture is performed by John Harrison with the Wichita State University Chamber Players and also Ronald Jenkins. You can hear his work at ronaldjenkins.com. You've been listening to Urban Agriculture. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon.
Hey, Vincent.
What?
See you upstairs at the vertical farm.
Or downstairs.
This is true.